Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The docking clamps hit the hull like a fist. Baron didn't move. He just listened to the sound of the docking collar pressurizing, the hiss of atmosphere matching it. Third time they'd stopped him for toll. He stood in the dark of the engine room, hand resting on a junction box he'd welded shut months ago. Inside it, wires ran to places they shouldn't. Connected things that weren't meant to be connected. He'd done the work himself. Nights when the ship was drifting cold between transit points, when no one was watching, and the stars didn't care. The first time they'd boarded, he'd paid. 40% of his cargo. Fuel cells bound for a mining colony that would have to wait another month for power. He'd watched the Drass soldiers haul crates through his airlock, their four legs clicking against his deck, their manipulator arms grabbing whatever they wanted. The Kethvori overseer hadn't even looked at him, just marked something on a tablet, then left. Cost of doing business. That's what he'd told himself. The second time, they'd taken more. Agricultural equipment, medical supplies, things people needed to survive. He'd stood in his cargo hold after they'd gone, looking at the empty space where a colony's future used to be, and something in him had shifted. Not anger. He was too old for anger. He'd started welding that night. Now they were back. Third time. And the carrion bloom wasn't a freighter anymore. Hadn't been for months. It was a delivery system. They just didn't know what it was delivering. Baron took one last look at the ship that had been his home for years. The rust. The patches. The decades of hard miles. The carrion bloom had been dying since the day he bought her. Now she'd die for something. He had minutes, maybe less. The ship's intercom crackled. External broadcast, cutting through his disabled comms like his systems didn't matter. Because to them, they didn't. Human vessel. You have failed to respond to lawful transit authority. Prepare for boarding and cargo inspection. Resistance will be noted. Noted. Not punished. Noted. Like he was a line item in a ledger. They were in. Baron didn't look back. He climbed out, sealed the hatch, and drifted into the dark. The Drass came through first. They always did. Squad leader named Grook, though Baron didn't know that. Didn't matter. What mattered was the way they moved. 4 legs eating ground, 2 arms up and ready, heads low in that aggressive posture their species used when they expected trouble. They didn't expect trouble from humans. Not really. But they were professional enough to pretend. Behind them, a HFY technician skittered along the ceiling, limbs clicking against conduits, sensor array sweeping for life signs. It found none. The ship was cold. Systems dead. No heat signature except residual engine warmth. Grook raised one manipulator arm. The squad halted. "Vessel is dark," he reported, voice carrying through the helmet comm to the corvette still docked outside. "No contact with crew. Proceeding to bridge." The response came clipped and precise. Kethvori. "Confirm cargo status first. The human may be hiding." "Understood." They moved through the corridor in formation. The carrion bloom was old, cramped by consortium standards. Built for function, not comfort. Exposed pipes, welded patches. The walls were scarred with decades of use, and someone had scratched words into the metal near the airlock. The Drass didn't read human script. They didn't care. The words said, "Every tub on its own bottom." Cargo hold 1 was sealed. Grook gestured, and 2 soldiers moved forward with breaching tools. The HFY dropped from the ceiling, interfacing with the door controls. Limbs moved in rapid calculation. "Lock is mechanical," the technician reported. "Primitive. No digital access." "Cut it." Plasma torch. Blue-white flame. The lock melted in seconds, and the door swung inward. Empty. Not just empty. Stripped. The hold had been gutted down to bare walls. No cargo, no containers, nothing but welded brackets where containers used to sit. And in their place, Grook stepped closer. Cylinders. Dozens of them. Oxygen tanks. Fuel cells. Canisters of welding gas. All connected by a web of wires and conduits that hadn't been here when this ship was built. He didn't understand the configuration. Didn't recognize it. The HFY did. Its limbs froze. Complete stillness. "Exit the hold," it said. "Exit now." "What?" "This is an incendiary device. Exit. Now." Baron watched them through a camera he'd hidden in the corridor ceiling. Pinhole lens, hardwired to a screen in the salvage pod, drifting in the debris field 2 kilometers away. He'd planted the pod days ago. Waited. Knew they'd come eventually. The consortium was predictable. That was their weakness. They believed in systems, protocols. They did the same thing every time because it worked every time. Board, seize, leave, no variables, no surprises. Until now. He watched the Drass scramble back from the cargo hold, watched the HFY skitter toward the airlock, limbs moving faster than he'd ever seen. They understood. Took them long enough. The squad was halfway to the airlock when the lead Drass stopped, turned, looked directly at a camera he shouldn't have been able to see, and held it. "Human," Grook said, "if you are watching, if you are here, you understand what happens next. Your government will not protect you. Your species will pay for this." Baron's scarred face didn't change. His thumb found the button. "Tolls doubled," he said to no one. "Pay up or burn." He pressed the button. The carrion bloom died the way it had lived. Violent, loud, uncompromising. The shaped charges in cargo hold 1 went first. Baron had angled them inward, toward the docking collar, using the ship's own hull as a blast director. The oxygen tanks ruptured a millisecond later, feeding the fire. Then the fuel cells. Then the welding gas. The sequence took less than a second. The result took longer to unfold. Fuel-air detonation. The fire needed oxygen to burn, and Baron had given it all the oxygen he had. The blast wave traveled through the pressurized docking collar and into the consortium corvette like a fist down a throat. Their systems were integrated, efficient. One failure cascading into the next. The corvette's reactor didn't breach, didn't need to. The fire found the ammunition storage, then the fuel lines, then the atmosphere. From 2 kilometers away, Baron watched the light. White first, then orange, then the cold dark of vacuum reclaiming what belonged to it. Debris spiraled outward in silence. Chunks of chrome hull, pieces of things that used to be alive. The carrion bloom was gone. The corvette was gone. Everything that had been inside them was gone. Baron felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. He felt lighter, like he'd been carrying something for months and had finally set it down. He keyed the salvage pod's maneuvering thrusters. Slow approach. No hurry. The dead didn't care about schedules. It took hours to pick through the wreckage. Baron was thorough. He'd always been thorough. The blast had scattered debris across a wide field, but some things survived. A chunk of corvette hull, relatively intact. Some salvageable electronics. A Drass helmet, cracked, but recognizable. He welded the helmet to the hull chunk, found a plasma cutter in his pod's toolkit, and went to work. The design was simple, crude. A human skull, grinning, crossed wrenches beneath it. The kind of thing a child might draw. The kind of thing that would be recognized. When he was done, he activated a low-power beacon and let the chunk drift. Someone would find it. Someone would understand. He keyed his pod's transmitter, short range, unencrypted. Let them hear. "This is the vessel formerly known as Carrion Bloom. Call sign Baron. Message for the Velthari Consortium. Tolls doubled. You want to use these lanes, you pay me. First payment's due yesterday. Interest is compounding." He cut the transmission, engaged the pod's punch drive, jumped to the first of 3 pre-plotted coordinates that would take him somewhere the consortium couldn't follow. Behind him, the debris field drifted, silent, cold, a graveyard without headstones. Commander Vethkai received the report on the bridge of the Sovereign calculation. He stood motionless as the intelligence officer delivered the details. 1 corvette destroyed. Boarding squad lost. A human freighter converted into an improvised explosive device. Deliberate. Planned. Executed with precision that suggested months of preparation. And a message. Broadcasting on loop from a chunk of debris marked with human symbols. "Show me," Vethkai said. The holographic display flickered. Audio played. A human voice, rough and unhurried. "Tolls doubled. You want to use these lanes? You pay me." Vethkai's mandibles clicked. The officers around him recognized the sound. Irritation that had passed into something else, something that required careful consideration. "The human's name," he said. The vessel was registered to a Damon Creel. Human. Cargo hauler. No military record. No criminal record. Unremarkable. Unremarkable. Vethkai's upper arms folded across his thorax. Dismissal. But his lower arms remained extended. Warning. An unremarkable human just destroyed a consortium vessel with improvised explosives, killed a full boarding squad, left a message demanding we pay him. The intelligence officer said nothing. "Find him," Vethkai said. "Find every human vessel in this sector. I want to know where they dock, where they refuel, who they speak to." This creature did not act alone. He had time, resources. Someone helped him. "And when we find him, Commander?" Vethkai turned. His compound eyes caught the light of the holographic display, fractured it into colors humans couldn't see. "We make an example, one that will be remembered for generations. One that will teach every human in this arm what it costs to resist the consortium." He looked at the frozen image of the debris field, the skull and crossed wrenches, crude and defiant. "Double the patrol frequency, deploy the response fleet, and send word to the other shipping lanes." His mandibles clicked once more. The humans need to understand. This changes nothing, except the severity of the consequences. The Sovereign calculation turned toward the Orion arm. Behind it, more corvettes fell into formation. The hunt had already begun. Waystation Brink sat in the dark between transit lanes like a tumor no one had bothered to cut out. It wasn't a station, really. More like a collection of old ships that had stopped moving and started accumulating. Freighters too broken to fly had been welded together, their hulls forming corridors, their cargo holds converted into bars and repair bays, and places where people slept when they had nowhere else to go. The air tasted like recycled sweat and engine grease. The lights flickered on a cycle no one had bothered to fix. Baron liked it. Places like this didn't ask questions, didn't remember faces, didn't care what you'd done as long as you paid for your drink, and didn't start fires. He'd docked the salvage pod in a maintenance bay 3 hours ago, traded some of the electronics he'd pulled from the Corvette wreckage for a bunk, a meal, and access to the station's comm network. The network was garbage, patched together from a dozen incompatible systems, but it worked well enough to hear what people were saying. People were saying a lot. The story had spread faster than he'd expected. A human freighter had destroyed a consortium corvette, killed the entire boarding party, left a message demanding payment. The details were already mutating. Some versions had him commanding a fleet. Others had him using alien weapons stolen from a military depot. One version claimed he'd personally strangled a Drass with his bare hands. Baron didn't correct anyone. Let them talk. Stories were leverage. Fear spreads faster than truth. He didn't need the truth. He sat in the corner of a bar that had been a fuel processing chamber in a previous life. The walls were stained with chemical residue that would never come out. A dozen humans occupied the space. Freighter crews between runs, mechanics looking for work, a few faces that belonged to people who'd stopped belonging anywhere. They watched him without watching him, pretending not to notice the scarred face, the missing fingers, the way he sat with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door. Mickelson came in first. 44 years old, and he looked 60. Hauling cargo through the arm aged you fast. He was thin in that way people got when they ate enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. His ship, the Duluth Star, was docked somewhere on the station's outer ring. Barron had seen it on approach. Good bones, but the hull was patchwork, and the engines were running hot. Mickelson crossed to Barron's table without hesitation, sat down across from him, didn't order a drink. "You're the one," he said. "Not a question." "Depends on what you're looking for. The one who blew up the Corvette, left that message." Mickelson leaned forward. His eyes were bloodshot, hands shaking slightly. "They hit my ship yesterday. Took everything. Not the usual cut. Everything. Said it was a security assessment. Said there'd be more assessments until whoever destroyed their ship was found." Barron didn't respond. Just watched. "I've been running this lane for 12 years, Mickelson continued. His voice cracked on the edges. "Paid every toll. Kept my head down. Did everything right. And now I've got nothing because someone decided to change the rules. You want an apology? I want to know what happens next." Mickelson's hands flattened on the table, steadying himself, because right now, every human ship in this sector is paying for what you did. And if you don't have a plan, if this was just some suicide run that happened to work, then we're all dead anyway. Might as well know now. Barron looked at him for a long moment. The sounds of the bar filled the silence, glasses clinking, low conversation, the hum of life support systems that were older than anyone in the room. "You want to know the plan?" Barron said. "Yeah. There isn't one." Barron watched Mickelson's face fall, let it fall all the way before he continued. "There's an outcome. Everything else is just steps." "What outcome?" "They stop taxing our ships." Mickelson laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "That's not an outcome. That's a fantasy. The consortium has more ships than we have crews. They'll just keep sending more until there's nothing left to send them against." "Maybe." Barron picked up his drink, something brown and strong that burned on the way down. "Or maybe they decide it's not worth the cost." "The cost? You killed one ship. They have dozens, hundreds if you count their whole fleet." "I didn't say their cost." Barron set the glass down. "I said the cost of doing this. Everything has a price. The question is, who's willing to pay it?" Before Mickelson could respond, the bar's door opened again. Tandros walked in. Tandros was 61 years old and looked like he'd been carved from the same metal as his ship. He was shorter than Barron, broader through the chest, with hands that had been broken and healed so many times the knuckles looked like geography. Former military engineer. 20 years in a fleet that didn't exist anymore, building things designed to break other things. Then, 20 years hauling industrial equipment through shipping lanes because it was the only work that used the same skills without requiring him to kill anyone. He'd been in the bar when Barron arrived, hadn't approached, just watched from across the room with eyes that calculated everything and gave away nothing. Now he crossed to the table and sat down next to Mickelson without asking permission. "Damon Creel," Tandros said. "I knew your father." Barron's expression didn't change. "A lot of people knew my father. He was a good welder. Taught you, didn't he?" "He taught me a lot of things." Tandros nodded slowly. His eyes moved to the salvage pod's docking manifest displayed on a wall screen nearby. Then back to Barron. "That trick with the fuel-air mix, the shaped charges directing the blast through the docking collar, that's not something you learn hauling cargo." "You learn a lot of things when you have time to think." "Months." Tandros leaned back in his chair. "You spent months rigging that ship, turned the whole thing into a bomb, and flew it around like it was still a freighter." He paused. "I've been doing something similar." Mickelson's head snapped toward him. "What?" "The patient burden isn't just a hauler anymore." Tandros's voice stayed level, calm, like he was discussing weather patterns. "Hasn't been for a while. I started modifications after the second time they boarded me. Figured if they came a third time, I wanted options." "Options," Mickelson repeated. You wired your ship to explode? I wired my ship to fight. There's a difference. Tandros looked at Baron. Mining charges. Industrial cutting lasers repurposed as point defense. A few other things I'd rather not discuss in public. Nothing as elegant as what you did with the carrion bloom. But enough to make them pay a price. Baron studied him. The old engineer met his gaze without flinching. Two men who'd spent months preparing for the same thing, alone, in the dark between transit points. Neither of them had known the other existed until now. How many others? Baron asked. Others? How many other captains have been making modifications? Tandros was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I didn't ask. But I've seen ships in the repair bays with work being done that doesn't match their cargo manifests. Welding in places that don't need welding. Equipment being installed that doesn't belong on a freighter. He shrugged. People get scared. They start making preparations. Mikkelsen looked between them. His fear was still there, but something else was creeping in alongside it. Something that looked like the first spark of heat in a cold engine. You're talking about fighting them, he said. Actually fighting them. I'm talking about making them decide whether taxing human ships is worth what it costs, Baron replied. Right now, it costs them nothing. We pay. They take. Everyone goes home. That math only works if we keep paying. And if we stop? Then they have to spend something to make us start again. Ships, soldiers, time, resources. Baron's voice was flat. No passion. No fire. Just numbers. The question is whether they're willing to spend more than they're taking. And whether we're willing to make them. The bar had gone quiet around them. Not silent. People were still talking. Still drinking. But the volume had dropped. Others were listening. Pretending not to. But listening. Baron didn't lower his voice. Let them hear. I'm not asking anyone to die, he said. I'm asking if anyone wants to stop being cargo. The consortium response came faster than anyone expected. Baron heard about it from a freighter captain who'd limped into Waystation Brink with a hull breach and a story that made his blood run cold. The Halcyon's Rest, a mid-sized hauler running agricultural supplies, had been intercepted by a consortium patrol. Standard approach, standard hail. But instead of boarding, the corvette had opened fire. No warning, no demand for cargo, just weapons discharge. The Halcyon's Rest had survived only because her captain had dumped his cargo and run, the mass reduction giving him just enough acceleration to reach the transit point before the second volley hit. His ship was crippled, his cargo was gone, but he was alive. The message was clear. The consortium wasn't boarding anymore. They were shooting first. Baron stood in the repair bay where the Halcyon's Rest was being patched together with salvage and prayer. The captain, a man named Worth, who looked like he hadn't slept in days, sat on a crate nearby, staring at nothing. They didn't even hail for the tax, Worth said. His voice was hollow. Just started firing, like we were target practice. They're changing tactics, Tandros said. He'd accompanied Baron to see the damage firsthand. His eyes moved over the hull breaches with professional assessment. Standard boarding puts their people at risk. After what happened to their corvette, they're not willing to take that risk anymore. So they just kill us instead? They're trying to kill the idea of fighting back. Baron walked along the damaged hull, running his hand over the scorched metal. Boarding takes time. Boarding can go wrong, but if they destroy ships from range, there's no chance for another trap. No chance for someone to fight back. Worth looked up. How do you fight back against that? They sit out there, pick us off before we can even see them. Their sensors are better. Their weapons are better. We're just targets. Baron didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the debris field where he'd waited for the corvette, the way the scattered metal and rock had hidden his salvage pod's signature, the way the consortium sensors, for all their sophistication, had been designed to track ships in open space, not to pick out a single pod drifting among thousands of chunks of identical debris. Their sensors are better, he said finally. In open space. Tandros caught his meaning. You're thinking about the graveyard. What's the graveyard? Worth asked. Shipping lane between here and the Kellis Run. Tandros moved to stand beside Baron, both of them looking at the damaged hull without really seeing it. There was a collision a few decades back. Big convoy, navigation failure, ships plowed into each other at transit speed. Debris field stretches for thousands of kilometers. Nobody cleans it up because nobody owns it. It's a navigation hazard, so most ships go around. But if you go through it, Baron said, their sensors don't help them. Too much interference. Too many false contacts. They'd have to get close to identify targets. Close enough to board? Close enough to die. Worth stood up slowly. You're talking about fighting them in there, turning that debris field into a trap. I'm talking about making them come to us on our terms, not theirs. Baron turned to face the damaged freighter captain. You want revenge for what they did to your ship. I want to survive. Then help me make sure no one else has to run. Baron's eyes, one clear, one clouded by scar tissue, held Worth's gaze without blinking. I'm going to need ships, captains who know how to fly ugly, people willing to stop being cargo. Worth looked at his crippled ship, at the holes in the hull that should have killed him, at the future that had been taken from him by a consortium that didn't even bother to demand payment before shooting. What do you need me to do? He asked. Aboard the Sovereign Calculation, Commander Veth Kai studied the analysis with growing unease. The holographic display showed the wreckage of the destroyed corvette in precise detail. Every fragment had been catalogued, every component traced, every aspect of the destruction mapped and modeled. The Yithmai technician designated 41 stood motionless beside the display, its limbs frozen in that perfect stillness that meant processing was complete. Explain, Veth Kai said. The device was not improvised in the way we assumed. 41's voice was flat, mechanical. Initial assessment suggested desperation, crude construction, a cornered animal striking blindly. Its limbs twitched once. That assessment was incorrect. Continue. The explosive configuration was precise. Shaped charges were positioned to direct maximum force through the docking collar. The fuel-air mixture was calibrated for optimal combustion in a pressurized environment. The timing sequence ensured the corvette could not detach before detonation. 41 paused. This was engineering. Deliberate. Calculated. The human who designed this understood exactly what he was building. Veth Kai's mandibles clicked softly. A military background? No recorded military service, no formal engineering training. But the work itself suggests expertise. Either self-taught over many years, or access to resources we have not identified. Other humans? Likely. The modifications required time, materials, space to work. A single operator could accomplish this, but assistance would have been more efficient. 41's limbs moved in rapid calculation. Recommendation: assume this human is not alone. Assume others are preparing similar modifications. Treat all human vessels as potential threats until confirmed otherwise. Veth Kai turned away from the display. The bridge of the Sovereign Calculation stretched before him. Clean lines, efficient design, officers at their stations performing duties with precision. This was how the galaxy was supposed to work. Order, hierarchy, the strong establishing rules, the weak following them. One human had disrupted that order. One rusting freighter had challenged a system that had operated without resistance for years. Unacceptable. New protocols, Veth Kai said. Effective immediately. All human vessels are to be disabled from range before any approach. No boarding actions. No docking. If the vessel cannot be disabled cleanly, it is to be destroyed. The bridge officers acknowledged. Efficient. Obedient. Additionally, Veth Kai continued, I want the patrol routes analyzed. This human chose his ambush location carefully. He knew where we would be and when. Someone provided that information. Find out who. And the human himself? Vethkai turned to look at the frozen image of the debris field. The skull and crossed wrenches, crude and defiant. He will surface again. Creatures like this cannot hide forever. They need to act. To prove something. His upper arms folded across his thorax. When he does, we will be ready. And we will make certain that every human in this sector understands the price of defiance. He looked at the display one more time. The analysis that showed sophistication where they had expected desperation, engineering where they had expected panic. For the first time in many years, Commander Vethkai felt something unfamiliar. Not quite concern. The consortium was too powerful for concern. But attention, yes. This human had his attention now. That would be the human's last mistake. The meeting happened in the cargo hold of Tandros's ship, the Patient Burden. Baron counted heads as they arrived. Mikkelsen, Wirth, still shaken but committed. A woman who captained a fuel hauler and didn't give her name. 2 brothers who ran a salvage operation out of a ship that looked like it should have been scrapped years ago. Others drifting in alone or in pairs until the hold was full of faces that shared one thing in common. They were done paying. Tandros had cleared space among the industrial equipment he usually hauled. The hold smelled like machine oil and ozone. Exposed circuits lined the walls. Baron recognized detonation triggers when he saw them. The old engineer had been busy. "They've changed tactics," Baron said without preamble. "No more boarding. They're shooting from range now. Disabling ships, taking cargo from wrecks, leaving survivors to spread the word." "We heard," one of the salvage brothers spoke up. "Took out 2 freighters yesterday near the Kellis approach. Just blew them apart. Didn't even ask for the tax first." "That's them trying to scare us into compliance. Make the cost of resistance so high that we go back to paying." Baron paused. "It means we scared them first. Scared them into killing us faster." Mikkelsen's voice was bitter. "How is that a win?" "It's not, yet." Baron looked around the room. "But it means they're not confident anymore. They're reacting, adapting. When someone reacts, they make mistakes." Tandros stepped forward. "Their new tactic depends on range. Stay far enough away. Use superior sensors and weapons. Never get close enough for a trap. It works in open space. It doesn't work in cluttered environments." "The graveyard," someone said. The fuel hauler captain. She'd been quiet until now. "You want to fight them in the graveyard. I want to take away their advantages." Baron moved to a makeshift display Tandros had rigged up. A holographic projection of the debris field, crude but functional. In here, their sensors are garbage. Too much interference. They can't track us at range, can't target us accurately. They'd have to come close. "Close enough to board," Tandros added, "which means close enough to trap." "And if they just don't come?" Wirth asked. "If they stay out in open space and let us rot in there?" "They won't," Baron's voice was certain. "Their whole system depends on making examples. They can't let us hide. Can't let us sit in there thumbing our noses at them. Their authority means nothing if we can just opt out. So they come in after us. They come in after us, and we make them pay for every meter." Silence settled over the hold. Baron watched the faces around him, fear on most of them, anger on some, calculation on a few. These weren't soldiers. They were haulers, mechanics, salvage operators, people who'd spent their lives avoiding fights because fights got you killed. But they were also people who'd watched everything they'd built get taken from them. People who'd paid and paid and paid until there was nothing left. People who'd reached the point where the cost of fighting didn't seem worse than the cost of not fighting. "I'm not going to lie to you," Baron said. "Some of us won't come back. Maybe most of us. The consortium has better ships, better weapons, better everything. The only thing we have is that we know they're coming, and they don't know what we're bringing." "What are we bringing?" one of the salvage brothers asked. Baron looked at Tandros. The old engineer smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Rust and reckoning," Tandros said. Same thing we've been building in our holds while they thought we were just cargo. The fuel hauler captain stepped forward. I've got 3,000 liters of refined propellant in my tanks, the kind that burns hot enough to melt through Drass armor. I've got mining charges, one of the salvage brothers said. Enough to crack an asteroid. Or a Corvette. One by one, they spoke. What they had. What they'd hidden. What they'd been preparing for the moment when paying stopped being an option. Baron listened, counted, calculated. It might be enough. It might not. But it was what they had. We leave in 6 hours, he said. Anyone who's not ready by then stays behind. No shame in it. This isn't about courage. It's about math. He looked around the room one more time. These people, with their rusted ships and improvised weapons, and the look in their eyes that said they'd rather die fighting than live as cargo. The consortium thinks they ended this when they started shooting, Baron said. They're wrong. They just changed the equation. So did we. He turned and walked out of the hold. Behind him, the others began to prepare. The graveyard lived up to its name. Baron guided what was left of his salvage pod through a maze of dead ships and shattered hopes. Everywhere he looked, wreckage. Freighters with their hulls torn open, spilling cargo that had frozen solid decades ago. A passenger liner, split in half, its windows staring out like empty eye sockets. Smaller debris, chunks of metal, frozen atmosphere, things that might have been people once, drifting in slow, endless spirals that would never stop. The collision that created this place had been an accident. Navigation failure during a convoy transit. Ships punching into real space on top of each other. Velocities mismatched. Hulls crumpling like paper. No survivors. No rescue. Just a field of death that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Too expensive to clean up. Too dangerous to ignore. Perfect. Behind him, the human fleet spread out among the wreckage. Fleet was generous. A handful of freighters, a fuel hauler, 2 salvage ships, and whatever else had answered the call. They moved slow, engines barely firing, letting momentum carry them deeper into the field. Each ship found a position near a large piece of debris, something that would mask their signature, make them look like just another corpse in the graveyard. Baron watched through his viewport as Tandros maneuvered the patient burden into the shadow of a dead ore carrier. The old engineer knew what he was doing. His ship disappeared against the larger mass, visible only if you knew exactly where to look. No comms from this point. They'd agreed on that. The consortium would be scanning for transmissions, triangulating signals, looking for any hint of organized activity. So the humans went silent. Dark. Dead. Communication happened the old way. Engine flashes, short burns that created visible pulses of light. Hand signals through viewports when ships drifted close enough. Patterns they'd agreed on before entering the field. 1 flash, I see you. 2 flashes, enemy contact. 3 flashes, engaging. Continuous burn. I'm hit. Primitive. Slow. Hard to track. Baron settled his pod into a crevice in the wreckage of what had once been a cargo container the size of a small building. His systems were already powered down to minimum. Life support. Sensors. Nothing else. In the cold dark of the graveyard, he was just another piece of debris. He checked the device he'd rigged in the pod's cargo space. Smaller than what he'd built into the carry-on bloom, but the same principle. Shaped charges. Fuel. Oxygen. A dead man's switch tied to his heartbeat. If he died, it blew. If he triggered it manually, it blew. Either way, someone was paying the toll. Then he settled back in his seat, watched the darkness through his viewport, and waited. The sovereign calculation dropped out of transit at the edge of the debris field like a predator arriving at a watering hole. Commander Vethkai stood on the bridge, his compound eyes taking in the holographic display that showed the graveyard in all its chaotic detail. Thousands of objects, millions of fragments, a navigation nightmare that had claimed ships even without hostile action. Analysis, he said. 41 responded from its station. limbs moving in rapid patterns across control surfaces. Sensor penetration limited. Debris density creates significant interference. Accurate tracking beyond short range is not possible. The humans are in there. Probability high. The debris field matches the tactical parameters suggested by analysis of the previous attack. Cluttered environment. Sensor interference. Forced close engagement. 41 paused. They are attempting to negate our advantages. Vethkai's mandibles clicked slowly. Around him, his officers waited. The response fleet held position. Corvettes arranged in precise formation, weapons armed, crews ready. All of them looking to him for direction. "Recommendations," he said. The tactical officer spoke first, a younger Kethvori, efficient but inexperienced. Saturation bombardment. Target the entire field with long-range weapons. Destroy everything. The humans cannot hide if there is nothing left to hide in. And the proof? Commander? The proof. Vethkai turned to face the officer. Bodies. Wreckage. Confirmation that the humans responsible for the attack on our corvette have been destroyed. Without proof, this action means nothing. We would just be firing into debris. Surely the destruction itself sends a message. The message is meaningless without a recipient. Vethkai's upper arms folded across his thorax. Dismissal. We are not here to destroy debris. We are here to end a rebellion. That requires witnesses, survivors who will carry the story of what happens to those who resist the consortium. 41 spoke again. Alternative approach. Send corvettes into the field in search pattern. Force the humans to reveal themselves. Engage and destroy with confirmed targeting. Recover wreckage for identification. The risk? Elevated. Close-range engagement in cluttered environment favors ambush tactics. The humans have demonstrated capability in this area. Vethkai considered. The previous attack had been elegant in its brutality, a trap that used the consortium's own protocols against them. These humans had proven they could think, could plan, could wait. But they were still humans, still primitive, still limited by inferior technology and inferior numbers. Deploy corvettes, Vethkai ordered. Cautious advance. Paired formation. No single vessels. Continuous sensor sweeps. At the first sign of contact, one vessel engages, while the other withdraws to report. And if they encounter a trap, then we will know where the trap is. Vethkai turned back to the display, and we will respond accordingly. The corvettes began to move, sliding into the graveyard like fingers probing a wound. Vethkai watched them go. Somewhere in that field of death, humans were waiting, hiding, preparing. He would find them, and when he did, he would teach them what it truly meant to challenge the consortium. The fuel hauler captain saw them first. 2 corvettes, moving in tandem, picking their way through the debris with careful precision. Their sensors swept back and forth, active scanning that lit up the graveyard like a searchlight. They were looking for engine signatures, heat sources, anything that didn't belong. She held her breath. Her ship was cold, dark, systems powered down to nothing. The only warmth came from her own body, and that wasn't enough to register at this range. The corvettes passed within a kilometer of her position, close enough to see their running lights through her viewport, close enough to count the weapon mounts on their hulls. She stayed motionless. A corpse among corpses. They moved on. She waited until they were well past, then risked a single engine flash. Short, quick. A pulse of light that would look like debris reflection unless you knew what to look for. Across the field, another flash answered. Then another. The word spreading through the human fleet in blinks of light and moments of darkness. Enemy contact. Corvettes in the field. Positions marked. The fuel hauler captain checked her systems. 3,000 liters of refined propellant in her tanks. The kind that burned hot enough to melt through Drass armor, she'd said. She hadn't been exaggerating. The modifications she'd made allowed her to vent that propellant through emergency ports, creating a spray of fuel that could be ignited remotely. Not a bomb, a flamethrower, a weapon that would turn space itself into fire. She watched the corvettes through her viewport, waiting, patient, learning their patrol pattern, the rhythm of their movement, the blind spots in their formation. When the moment came, she would be ready. The moment came faster than anyone expected. One of the salvage brothers, the younger one, whose name Baron had never learned, made a mistake. His ship's systems glitched, a power surge that sent a brief electromagnetic pulse into the void. Brief, but enough. The corvettes detected it, changed course, accelerated toward the source. Baron saw it happen through his viewport, the corvettes moving with sudden purpose, weapons charging, closing on a position that held a rusted salvage ship crewed by a man who'd never asked for any of this. No time for signals, no time to coordinate. The salvage brother did the only thing he could. He fired up his engines and ran. The chase lasted less than a minute. The corvettes were faster, more maneuverable, designed for exactly this kind of pursuit. They herded the salvage ship into a clear space between debris clusters, cut off escape routes, prepared to disable and capture. They never saw the fuel hauler coming. She'd been drifting in their blind spot, cold and dark, waiting for exactly this opportunity. When the corvettes committed to the chase, she ignited her engines at full burn, closing the distance in seconds. Her venting system activated. 3,000 liters of propellant sprayed into the void, a cloud of volatile fuel that expanded outward in a glittering sphere. Then she triggered the igniter. Space doesn't burn the way atmosphere does. Fire needs oxygen, and space has none. But the propellant was self-oxidizing, designed for exactly this kind of application. When it ignited, it created a bloom of flame that expanded outward like a dying star, engulfing everything in its radius. The lead corvette flew directly into the inferno. Baron watched as fire washed over the alien ship. Sensors melted. Hull plating warped. The corvette tumbled, blind and burning, its crew unable to see or respond. The salvage brother took his chance, reversed course, accelerated past the burning ship, disappeared back into the debris field. The second corvette tried to evade, almost succeeded. But Tandros had seen the fire bloom from across the field, and he'd already been moving. The patient burden emerged from behind a dead freighter, mining charges launching from improvised tubes welded to the hull. The charges weren't sophisticated. Magnetic clamps, timed fuses, industrial explosives designed to crack asteroids. They slammed into the corvette's hull and detonated in sequence, tearing open compartments, venting atmosphere, turning a sleek consortium vessel into a broken shell. The surviving corvette, the one that had been burning, tried to withdraw. Its engines fired erratically, damaged but functional. It limped toward the edge of the debris field, toward safety, toward the rest of the fleet. It made it halfway before someone else finished it off. Baron didn't see who. Didn't matter. The corvette broke apart, and its pieces joined the rest of the graveyard. Silence settled over the field. The silence of vacuum, of death, of the space between one breath and the next. Then Baron saw the rest of the consortium fleet move. They came in force, no more paired formations. No more cautious advances. The remaining corvettes plunged into the graveyard like a fist, weapons firing, sensors blazing, hunting for any hint of human presence. Behind them, the sovereign calculation advanced to the edge of the field, close enough to coordinate, far enough to stay safe. The humans scattered. Baron watched from his hidden position as the battle dissolved into chaos. Freighters that had been playing dead suddenly came alive, engines burning, weapons firing, each ship fighting its own desperate engagement. The corvettes were faster, better armed, better crewed, but the debris field negated their advantages. They couldn't maneuver freely, couldn't target accurately, couldn't coordinate when a chunk of wreckage the size of a building might drift between them and their target at any moment. The fuel hauler died first. A corvette caught her in the open, weapons discharge tearing through her hull before she could reach cover. One of the salvage brothers died next, then a freighter captain, then another. But they all took consortium ships with them. A corvette that got too close to Tandros discovered the old engineer had more than mining charges. Cutting lasers designed for industrial works carved through the alien hull like it was paper. Another corvette fell to a trap, a chunk of debris that turned out to be a bomb, detonating when the ship passed too close. The mathematics of it were brutal. Humans were dying faster. But the consortium was dying too, and they weren't used to that. Baron watched Mickelson's ship take a hit. Direct strike to the engine section. The Duluth star began to drift, trailing debris, systems failing. Mickelson had seconds to live, and he knew it. He used those seconds well. Baron saw the Duluth star change course, damaged engines firing one last time, pushing the crippled freighter directly toward the nearest corvette. Mickelson's voice crackled over an open channel. The first transmission any human had made since entering the field. "Tolls due," was all he said. The Duluth star rammed the corvette at full acceleration. Both ships crumpled on impact, hulls folding into each other like paper crushed in a fist. Then Mickelson detonated everything he had left. The explosion lit up the graveyard. When it faded, both ships were gone. Nothing left but expanding debris and silence. Baron made his decision. The battle was turning against them. Too many human ships destroyed. Too few consortium vessels killed. The survivors were scattered, fighting alone, dying alone. If this continued, the consortium would win through simple attrition, unless someone changed the equation again. He powered up his salvage pod. Minimal systems, engines, navigation. The dead man's switch armed and ready. Around him, debris shifted as his thrusters fired, pushing him out of his hiding spot and into the chaos of the battle. He wasn't trying to survive anymore. He was making it count. He didn't head for a corvette. Instead, he aimed for the edge of the field, for the sovereign calculation, sitting just outside the graveyard like a spider watching its web. Cut off the head! His pod was small, slow, no weapons except the one he was sitting on. Against a consortium cruiser, it was nothing. A gnat against a giant. But the giant was watching the battle, focused on the chaos inside the field, not looking for a single salvage pod drifting through the debris. Baron pushed wreckage ahead of him as he flew. Chunks of dead ships, frozen cargo, anything large enough to mask his approach. He'd done this before, waiting in a debris field while a corvette docked with his trap. This was the same principle, larger scale. The sovereign calculation grew in his viewport, massive, pristine, chrome hull gleaming even in the dim light of the graveyard's edge. He could see the bridge section, elevated above the main hull, windows glowing with internal light. Vethkai was in there, watching, commanding, believing he was safe. Baron opened a channel, short range, unencrypted. Let them hear. "Commander," he said. His voice was calm, unhurried, a man who had already made peace with what came next. "This is the human you've been hunting. Call sign Baron. I have a message for the consortium." Silence. Then a response, a voice Baron had never heard, precise and cold. "You are speaking to Commander Vethkai of the Velthari Consortium. Your message is irrelevant. You will be destroyed." Probably. Baron adjusted his course slightly. The sovereign calculation was close now, close enough to see individual hull plates, close enough to see the weapon mounts tracking, searching for him among the debris. "But I wanted you to understand something first. You have nothing I wish to understand." "You're wrong." Baron's thumb rested on the trigger. The dead man's switch pulsed against his wrist. "You came here to end a rebellion, to make an example, to teach humans what happens when they resist. But you've got the math wrong, Commander. You can kill everyone in this field. Kill every human in the arm. It won't matter. Explain your reasoning." Vethkai's voice carried a note of something, curiosity perhaps, or simply the arrogance of someone who believed they had already won. "Because the ones who survive will remember. They'll tell others. They'll teach others how to build bombs from cargo holds and turn freighters into weapons. All ships you send into these lanes will cost you more than you take. Every toll you collect will be paid back in blood. Baron paused. That's the math. You can win today and still lose tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you decide it's not worth the cost. You believe this changes anything? I believe I'm already dead. Baron smiled, though no one could see it. Have been since I lit the fuse on my ship. What's left is just the bill coming due, and I intend to collect. He triggered the final burn, engines at maximum, pod accelerating directly toward the Sovereign Calculations bridge section. The debris he'd been pushing ahead of him scattered outward, a cloud of shrapnel and wreckage spreading across the cruiser's approach. Vethkai's voice came one last time, sharp, commanding. The pattern clicked too late. All weapons, target that! Baron detonated the pod. Not against the hull. He was too far away for that, would never have reached it before their weapons tore him apart. Instead, he triggered the charges at maximum yield, the same configuration he'd used on the carry-on Bloom, directing the blast forward into the debris field he'd pushed ahead of him. The explosion turned wreckage into weapons. Chunks of metal accelerated to killing velocity. Shrapnel sprayed across the Sovereign Calculations forward section like buckshot from a giant's gun. Sensors shattered, hull plating crumpled. The bridge section took the worst of it. Windows blown inward, atmosphere venting, systems failing. The Sovereign Calculation didn't break. It was too big, too well built, too resilient. But its commander did. The surviving consortium ships withdrew. Not a retreat. The consortium didn't retreat. A tactical redeployment. A recognition that continued engagement offered diminishing returns. The cruiser limped away from the graveyard, its forward section a ruin, its command structure decapitated. The remaining corvettes followed, damaged and demoralized. In the debris field, the human survivors emerged from their hiding spots. Fewer than had entered, much fewer. Ships that would never fly again. People who would never breathe again. The cost of what they'd done written in wreckage and silence. No one said it out loud. They all knew the number. But they'd done enough. Tandros guided the patient burden through the graveyard, checking for survivors. He found some, not many. The fuel hauler captain was gone. Mikkelsen was gone. The salvage brothers, both of them, it turned out. Others whose names had been spoken once and would never be spoken again. Baron was gone too. His pod's final transmission had been recorded by every ship in range, his last words echoing through the void. Tolls due. The younger captain, Greer, who'd inherited his father's ship and had stayed at the edge of the battle, watching but not fighting, was the one who found the beacon. It was drifting among the wreckage of Baron's pod. A simple device, jury-rigged from salvage, broadcasting on a loop. Baron's voice, rough and unhurried, delivering a message to anyone who would listen. This is Baron, formerly of the Carrion Bloom. The Velthari Consortium charged tolls on human ships crossing the Orion Arm. Those tolls are no longer in effect. The lane is open. Any attempt to reinstate taxation will be met with interest. A pause. Then, tolls closed, lanes open. Try again, and the price goes up. The message looped, repeated. Would keep repeating until the beacon's power died, maybe years from now. Greer listened to it 3 times before he cut the feed. In the silence that followed, someone started welding. It was Tandros. The old engineer had found a damaged ship, one of the freighters that had survived the battle but couldn't fly anymore. Its captain was dead. Its hull was breached. By any reasonable measure, it was scrap. Tandros didn't see scrap. He saw material. He pulled the patient burden alongside the wreck and began cutting. Salvaging components, harvesting parts. The sound of his plasma torch echoed through the vacuum, or would have if sound traveled in space. Instead, it was a vibration, felt through hulls and suits, the heartbeat of someone who refused to stop. Greer watched for a while. Then he powered up his own ship's salvage systems, and got to work. One by one, the survivors joined in, cutting, welding, rebuilding, the debris field that had been a graveyard becoming something else, a shipyard, a monument, a beginning. Nobody spoke about Baron. There wasn't anything to say. He'd been a man who understood costs and was willing to pay them. That was all. That was enough. The consortium would be back someday. Maybe soon. Maybe years from now. They'd rebuild their fleet, find a new commander, decide that the Orion arm was worth the trouble after all. And when they came, they'd find humans waiting for them. Humans who had learned from Baron. Humans who knew how to turn rust into weapons and silence into strategy. The toll would always come due. That was the nature of things. But now, both sides understood the price. Greer finished welding a patch onto a damaged hull section, stepped back, looked at his work. It was ugly, crude, functional. It would hold. He turned to look out at the debris field, the wreckage of ships that had been enemies, the wreckage of ships that had been friends, all of it drifting together now, slowly merging, becoming part of the same graveyard that would remain here forever. Somewhere in that field, what was left of Baron drifted too. Atoms scattered, purpose complete. A man who decided enough was enough and spent himself to prove it. Tandros's voice came over the comm, the first words anyone had spoken since the battle ended. "Greer, you still with us?" Greer looked at the stars, at the debris, at the future that waited beyond both. "Yeah," he said, "I'm still here." Silence. Then, "Good. We've got work to do." Greer nodded to no one, picked up his tools, went back to welding. The lane was open. The toll was closed. And somewhere in the void, the echo of Baron's voice kept playing, a reminder and a warning and a promise all at once. Some men paid what they owed, and some men changed what things cost.
Hey there, Space Human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here. Or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.